Can you believe that it is now race week? It's just 3 days from our first start line for the Dopey Challenge. And today we are going to be talking about both 10K and the half marathon. And the key takeaway here is you probably feel really good right now. And that is actually a dangerous thing. All right. So, welcome back to the countdown to Dopey. Again, today is day 3. And I'm your host, Jill Bartholomew, head coach at Be Fierce Multisport. And we are here to talk about the 10K and the half marathon. If you are doing the Dopey Challenge, you are heading into your second of 4 races, your second of 4 start lines, and hopefully your second of 4 finish lines and your second large medal. We are at the point where things often start to feel pretty good. Your travel's done. You figured out what you forgot to pack, what you forgot to bring with you, and you're figuring it out. You got your bibs. You got 1 race under your belt. If this is your first time running a Run Disney race, you've kind of figured it out at this point. You figured out the buses, you figured out how the corrals work, and you're here. And you know what? You're pretty adapted. Hopefully by now you've run 1 race, and at worst that K was a shakeout run. I hope that you did not race yesterday. Let's hope that your legs are still fresh for the 10K. But you need to keep your legs awake. The early mornings, you know what? They aren't quite old yet. You're only in your second early morning. You're moving pretty well. Your confidence is pretty high. And that means we are at the exact point where you need to have discipline. And we need discipline because most Dopey weekends don't unravel just because, an athlete feels bad. They unravel when athletes feel great. That's when mistakes happen and you start giving yourself permission to push. Now, we've talked a couple of times about the need for restraint. Today is no different from that. So, we're going to say you're stacking meaningful distance at this point. The decisions that you make today are really going to show up tomorrow, heading from the 10K into the half. This is the first time where, you actually have to think about recovery. Well, for most of us, 5K, we've run so many of them in training. If you trained for Dopey, you ran a bunch of miles and a bunch of 5Ks. You ran some 10Ks and you definitely ran longer than that, but how many of them did you do back to back? And so today, I believe personally that the 10K is where you have the most opportunity to make the marathon go south. That's right. The 10K is, in my view, as a coach and as a previous participant, I have done this 7 times. I'll be there again right next to you this year. It is the most important race. This is the race where I take it the easiest, actually. I love racing the 5K here. I don't follow my own advice all that well, but the 10K, I wave to my friends as they pass me, even though I'm a faster runner than they are, because I really want to crush the marathon. All right, let's talk about the 10K. It is deceptive. It's short enough to feel easy for many people. You've raced 1 day already. You're heading into this. Your body's feeling good. You've shaken out any of the swelling that maybe you accumulated with all the travel. You've got that out of your system. You've adjusted to the humidity. You've adjusted to the early morning. And the weather this year is looking like it's going to be fantastic unless the forecast changes between when I record this and our race day, which it is Florida, so it's bound to happen. So I might be a liar. It might be freezing and it might be snowing. I don't know. But you've adjusted. So think about it this way. The 10K has one job and one job only. It's to get you to the half marathon. It's to get your body shaken out, warm, fueled, intact, and in one piece, showing up injury free. So if you finish, and this is my challenge to you, if you finish the 10K and you're walking past the start line or the finish line, down the finisher chute, collecting your bottled water, collecting your power aid. And the thought that goes to your head is, wow, I could have given that more. That's awesome. That's exactly what I want you to feel. That felt controlled. You did it correctly. You should feel, wow, I did great, but I could have done more. If instead you finished and the thought that went through your head is, Wow, I crushed that. You probably did a little bit too much. It's not the end of the world, but doesn't set you up as well as you otherwise could be for tomorrow. It means you have a bigger job for you tonight to recover and show up nice and well prepped and fresh for tomorrow than you otherwise would. And we'll talk about maybe some tactics on how to do that towards the end here. All right, now let's move on to the half marathon. So, day 3 of the Dopey Challenge, as we know, is the half marathon. This is possibly the most exciting race of the series. It's on Saturday, everybody's awake, and suddenly the crowds got really, really big. Why is that? Well, the 5 and 10K are during the week, and the marathon and half marathon are not. And they are much larger crowds. And it's really interesting how it goes that way. If you look at racing in general, 5Ks and 10Ks tend to be big, but not super big. They're super accessible to everyone. That also means that distance runners don't always gravitate towards them. But pro tip, if you are a distance runner and you want to get faster, go race some 5Ks. Teaches you and your muscles a lot of important lessons about being accessible and burning out and moving super fast. But anyways, so the crowd got super, super big. What does that mean? It means that the adrenaline's moving. It means you're more excited. The atmosphere is more exciting. You might not be in the same corral. I don't know if they're doing split corrals this year or not. In the past, your corral on the half marathon and marathon were not necessarily the same corral that you were in on the 5K and the 10K. It could be that way this year. It might not be. I guess we will find out by the time you hear this recording. Anyways, so this is where all of that comes together. And you really start feeling the pressure to start racing other people. You're feeling great. The crowds are loud. Guess what? Now the pacers are out. They weren't out on the 5K. They might have been out on the 10K, but they're definitely out there in the half marathon. And it is so tempting to run in the next pace group or the first pace group that's in your corral, because you know what? Everybody wants as much space between them and the balloon ladies as they can possibly get, even those in A. Okay, but this is not the race that you are out to prove yourself to anyone. This is not a standalone race. Remember, you are less than halfway through Dopey Challenge. And even when you cross the finish line, newsflash, you are still less than halfway through the miles of Dopey Challenge. First time I realized that, I was standing at the start line of the marathon, and one of the announcers came on and said, "Congratulations, you are not yet halfway." And that was so soul crushing to me. But you know what? It is something you should really think about. Is that at the end of the half marathon, you've got 3 medals in hand and you are not halfway there. Just let that sink in for a second, because you've raced at that point 3 races. You've gone through 2 recoveries. You have nailed your nutrition. You've nailed your pacing, and you get to do more than what you just did tomorrow. All right. So, as a result, you're out to prove one thing, and that is that you are controlled, you are patient, and you are protecting your body so that you show up tomorrow with no sprains, no injuries, and best of all, without sore legs. All right. So, great way to do any race, but especially this one, is negative pacing is a great tool. If you've never done that before, and this is a little different from what you're going to do if you're with a pace group, but negative pacing is when you start out below your target pace and you finish slightly above it, meaning that you start slow and you finish fast. That doesn't mean that you're pushing every little second out of every mile that you can. It means you are starting in a very controlled manner. This is, in fact, the most common technique that I will teach my own athletes to follow when they're racing a race, especially one that is either very long or a new distance to them, or if they're going for a PR. The reason for that is you cannot make up energy lost. So if you start out and you start out super fast, you burn through all that glycogen, and we've talked so much about fueling. You burn through all that glycogen that you've built up, and now you are racing 2 races. You're racing the race to the finish line. And you are racing the race against time to keep the energy in your system that you need to finish the race. So, a better tactic is to start out a little bit on the slower side and controlled, and every mile bring your pace just a little bit faster. It is a proven technique that will get you a PR across the finish line, and you will finish less sore. Many of you will be going with the Galloway Pacers. They do not follow this, right? With the Galloway Pacers, they will follow the walk run and they will be super consistent once they're past the first half mile. Why past the first half mile? Because that initial bum rush is really hard to predict. But come the finish line, they are usually pretty on top of things. Okay, so on your 10K, I would race that again, maybe 10, 15, 20% slower than you normally would. And that's okay. For me, my 10K at Disney tends to be about 5 minutes slower than a normal 10K, maybe even 10 minutes. And I do stop at every character on the 10K and on the half. The half marathon, I'm usually depending on the race weekend, I'm usually anywhere between 5 and 12 minutes slower than my normal half marathon pace. So if you think about that, that would be for me about 5, call it 10, 12% slower. I tend to have a pretty quick half marathon. That is one of my favorite distances. Why is that? It's because you can get up in the morning, you can go run it, and then you have the rest of your day in front of you. It is not long enough to dominate your entire day and to steal it from you. Where a marathon, which we are going to talk a lot about tomorrow, the marathon steals your entire day. Okay, so starting to wrap this up, today is about protecting Sunday. Every day is about protecting Sunday. You're not winning Saturday. Maybe you're in the front of the pack and you are capable of racing every single day. That is not most people. If you're in the most people category, don't race it. Have fun, do your thing, see the sights, see the characters, enjoy the race. You're not chasing pace, you're not chasing PR. While I do hate the saying that we PR in fun at Disney races, it is kind of true for many people. Now, that said, I do have many PRs at Disney races, but I set out to do that. You are not going to respond to adrenaline. What I tell my athletes is, you know what, that first quarter mile, go have fun, do what you're going to do, and then check your watch, check in with your body, and settle into the pace that we decided you were going to run before we started. And that gets back to things, always have a plan. Know what pace you plan to run and check yourself. Also, this is a good time to be checking your equipment because you have not yet lined up to your first start line. Make sure that auto pause is turned off. If you are on an Apple Watch, it by default is turned on. Garmin also many times it will also be turned off. When auto pause is turned on, that means if you stop to tie your shoes or use the toilet, it is going to pause your watch and your time and your chip time are no longer going to match. And if you're not used to this, come the end of it, when you get your results, you're going to say, whoa, whoa, whoa. Why does Disney think I was so much slower than I think I was? And this is the point where we start to see all the posts show up on Facebook and elsewhere that say the course was mismarked and Disney doesn't know how to tell time. The reality is the course is not mismarked and they do know how to tell time, but your watch was paused, which is why it looks different. This is also a good time to start talking about race execution. When you are walking, you should walk right, run left. You should also keep in mind that there are a lot of turns on these courses. Some of them are big sweeping turns like an on-ramp. Others are through the park where it's a little twisty windy. Remember back in high school, we learned all about tangents. Well, in running, it applies too. If you run on the inside of a curve, you are going to run a shorter distance than if you're on the outside of a curve. In this case, a average highway lane is 12 feet wide. If you imagine that some of those on-ramps are close to a mile in length and the difference between the two white lines is 12 feet, Imagine, do your math, you are running a significantly extra distance if you are running on the outside of the curve than on the inside. Over the course of your half marathon, that could add up to over a mile. Just think about that. So when you come to the end, if your watch says you ran 14 miles, not a big deal. Course was not mismarked. What happened was Disney certified these courses with USATF. And what that means is that a line was certified from the start line to the finish line. In this case, that line is the perfect line. It's just like in F1 or in NASCAR or any other racing. It is the literal shortest distance from point A to point B. Many of our local races measure the line down the middle of the road so that if you're running on the inside of a curve, you may actually come up with a shorter distance than the measured course. And if you're running on the outside of a curve, you'll of course, come up with a slightly longer distance. That's not the case here. So run the tangents. If you have an S curve in front of you, do your best to run straight through it. Obviously, again, if you are walking, walk to the right so that runners can run to your left and don't impede each other. And of course, runners' etiquette, do not walk or run more than two abreast because that will make the people around you very grumpy. Today, eat early, fuel consistently, start slower than you think you should. Let other runners go around you. Run your own race, not theirs. If you need to, walk the aid stations. There is nothing wrong with walking. Focus on your effort, not your pace. See the sights, take the pictures, see the characters, have fun, meet your friends, do whatever. There's no prize for racing the half today unless you're planning on podiuming. Just go out, do your thing so that you feel good showing up tomorrow. Okay, so I said at the end we were going to talk a little bit about recovery heading into the half marathon and then heading into the marathon. So the 10K is the first race where there's actual significant stress on your legs. Now, the amount of stress depends on how close to your threshold pace you are running. Obviously, no matter what, there is 6.2 miles worth of pounding on your muscles and your entire body. And that presents its own stress, especially if you have nerve problems, back problems, joint problems, etc. So I'm not going to talk about those because I am not a doctor. And I'm sure you consulted your doctor before you showed up to the start line on that. What you should do today is hydrate, drink that water, drink the electrolytes. Feed your body, take protein in to help repair your muscles. That does not mean go out and eat every steak that you can find, but it does mean find a protein source that you like and eat it. But again, don't overeat. It also means that you should be out there stretching, both dynamic and static stretching. Some really good stretches are, of course, the typical ones that we're familiar with: runner's lunges, forwards, reverse, side to side, and various stretches for any areas that you typically get tight in, which for most people are going to include the hip flexors and the hamstring. So toe touches are here very useful, as are quad stretches. If you brought a band with you, that's also very useful for assisting those stretches. All right, with that, we're going to end. I will see you tomorrow when we talk about the marathon and some strategies to get through the marathon. If this is your first time at Dopey, the marathon is the most challenging, and welcome to almost halfway through your miles. All right, this is Jill Bartholomew. Be fierce, be you, and I'll see you tomorrow.